Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of RHAA Rewind, the show where we hit that rewind button on one of our alumni's journeys and break it down. No two journeys are ever the same, and every journey deserves to be heard. We are your hosts, Andy Tran.
And Chantal Wong.
All right, guys, for the first time ever, Chantal and I are recording this in the exact same room.
We're right next to each other,
We're right next to
for
each
everyone
other.
who's not on visual.
Yeah. So this actually leads into our first update, RHAA update. Drumroll, please. RHAA is now on YouTube. So starting with this episode, you can now see us and also listen to us. So starting with this episode, we also have our first two episodes on video as well with Jesse Wong and Sarah Smith. So you guys can have some fun catching up.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. You can check us out on video. We will be recording separate rooms in those two ones, but we are together for this one specifically.
Yeah. And hopefully in the future, we can record in the same room or do a mix of both. Mm-hmm. We'll never know.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So any other RHAA updates, Chantal?
Well, at the time that we are releasing this podcast, we have just pulled off a very successful event for Uncork Your Support. So thank you everyone who supported that. Special shout out to Tom Kelly, Violet Excuse, and Chef Tommy for hosting the entire event, and of course all of the RHAA committee members that were involved. And all of the proceeds ended up going to funding student awards for this year. So again, thanks everyone for your support.
Awesome. Maybe that should be on our YouTube.
What? The awards?
Or no, the Uncork Your Support.
Oh, possibly. I think we have that recording somewhere. Yeah, for anyone who did purchase a ticket and didn't end up going to the live session, they should have received an email with the recording to everything as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. All right. So not very many updates this time around. So do you want to move on to what's in the news?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So my first story, news just broke earlier on this week that in Ontario, Doug Ford is now increasing the minimum wage to $15. Now, usually this wouldn't really affect hospitality, but a key thing to note is that he said that there's no longer going to be a liquor server wage.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, so all the liquor servers or servers will just get paid the regular minimum wage, to $15. Because before, now, it was less. Yeah. It was 12 something. Because people think that, tips would make up the difference.
Right. Yeah, that was the reasoning behind it. And I think to some extent, the tips part was never controllable, whereas the actual wage part was. So I'm more than okay with hospitality workers getting paid more.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because it is maybe at a certain point in time, the tips would have made up the difference.
But certainly not in COVID.
Not in COVID. And you have to realize the tips that the servers make, they don't get to keep all of them too.
Yeah,
because there's the tip outs for the back of house and the hosts. So technically they're not really getting a lot of tips in their pockets.
And it depends varying on where you work with, right, as well. I've heard stories and I know people who their boss actually takes all their tips. So they don't even split it among their workers. Sometimes it is split among the workers, sometimes it's not. So it's just so varying per company that I feel it's pretty reasonable that there is no liquor wage anymore, in my opinion.
So I guess the consensus here is that that's a good thing.
I don't think it's a good thing. Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been in the front-facing serving industry, but I think it's a totally fair wage.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any news stories from you, Chantal?
Yeah. So I was actually looking at Cornell, which is offering an Executive Master of Management in Hospitality, an EMMH, apparently. And I thought it was kind of interesting because the way they worded it, it's very much designed for hospitality professionals who are already in the industry and just want to advance their skills. And it's a mix of online and also in-person classes. So I think it's almost something that came out of COVID because it's such a hybrid format.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically a graduate program for hospitality. Mm-hmm. That's pretty unheard of.
There's not a ton of Masters of Hospitality, that is for sure. And you also get to choose from like specializations in hospitality as well. So I think it's an interesting concept for sure. I'd say one of a kind program, as they said. So I don't know. I have never personally thought about pursuing my master's just because I really want to just jump into the industry. But would you ever get your master's? Maybe you would go to Cornell.
Yeah. And I think this also poses the question, is a master's in hospitality necessary in order to be successful in the industry?
I don't think it's like a requirement for you to be successful in the industry. I think most people in the industry actually didn't even study hospitality.
That is true.
So that's what's great about our industry. It's so flexible. There's so many opportunities. I don't think it's necessary, but I do think given the right circumstance, a master's can certainly like advance you in some sort of way. I know quite a few of our like a lot of our professors got their master's not in hospitality necessarily, but if you want to stay in hospitality, it is an option, depending on what path you want to take.
Yeah, so it's not a necessity, but probably it would be an advantage for sure.
I definitely don't think it harms you in any way to get your master's at all.
No, for sure.
I think all of our professors would agree with us.
Oh yeah, more school.
But yeah, that's my news update for the week.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for our intro. Short and sweet this week, but you guys are in for a treat because our guest this week is Morgan Da Rocha. He a Ryerson alumni from 2015. You'll get to hear about his journey, starting from, I believe it was the Westin. He was high sought after.
Yes.
He's currently in Vancouver. That's how high sought after he was. So yeah, you get to hear all about his journey, his very interesting and unique journey, and how he made opportunities for himself, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. So without further ado, here it is. We're going to hit that rewind button with Morgan Da Rocha.
Morgan Da Rocha started his undergraduate career in the field of life science. While in school, he was working various roles in the hospitality industry and felt strongly that this was his passion. And so in 2011, he made the switch to Ryerson, and thus his HTM journey began. While at Ryerson, Morgan began a food and beverage internship with Starwood Hotels, which led to various opportunities within the company. Through these rotations, Morgan developed his passion for sales within hospitality, which eventually led to his current position as a regional business travel sales manager with Sheraton in Vancouver. Due to the ongoing pandemic, Morgan was unfortunately let go from the company and had to pivot his career. He spent a short stint as a commodity trader in the field of agriculture. However, with his dedication and undeniable work ethic, Morgan was ultimately brought back into the fold at Sheraton. Throughout his busy schedule, Morgan finds time to give back to the HTM program, getting involved any way possible through RHAA initiatives. Hear his journey and more, as we're about to hit rewind with Morgan Da Rocha.
All right, everyone, please welcome onto RHAA Rewind, Morgan. Yay.
Hello,
hey, Morgan.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for agreeing to be on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat a little bit about my journey and anything I can to give back to the RHAA and Ryerson at large. So
awesome. All right. So this is called RHAA Rewind. So I guess let's hit rewind. So back to the very beginning. The first question I always like to ask everyone is, why did you choose to study hospitality? And why did you choose Ryerson?
So that's a great question. So a little bit of background on me. Ryerson actually wasn't where I first started my university career. What I first did out of high school was I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted. At the time, I was looking at I wanted to live in the city. I wanted to go to a strong, reputable school, and I ended up selecting University of Toronto in the downtown campus. I was accepted into the life sciences program at U of T, and then all throughout university, I actually worked in the restaurant industry. And in year one of taking part in university at U of T, I realized quite quickly that I didn't want to pursue anything with life science. I took it because I thought, great school, great program, maybe I'll become a chiropractor, maybe I'll become a doctor. Didn't have the grades for that, but I was dreaming, right? And so I thought that might be the route that I'd take. But as soon as I went there in first year, I realized this wasn't necessarily my passion. This wasn't going to give me the outlook in life that I wanted to live. And at the same time too, I found it really interesting, but I just didn't see myself doing anything in the medical field as a career, just personally, out of enjoyment. So then, while I was in university in year one, I was reconsidering what I wanted to do. Do I want to transfer programs? Do I want to take another year off to figure out what I plan to do? And then I thought to myself and searched online hospitality and tourism management. And I'd realized at the time too that Ryerson came up as one of the only two schools in Canada at the time, Ryerson and Guelph, that offered a Bachelor of Commerce degree specializing in business, but tailored to the hospitality and tourism management side of business. And I thought to myself, I love what I'm doing right now. I could maybe see myself running a restaurant or working potentially into hotels. And at the end of the day, at least I'm getting a business degree. So I think this could be a good route to take, because business is business and it tailors into something that I already know that I love. So I ended up applying and transitioning into that program from U of T after year one.
Cool. So life science to hospitality, those are two different
Very different
fields of
areas.
study. So like I'm just curious, what made you decide to pick life science first, like right out of high school?
I think it was potentially the interest that I had in science at large, as well as the lack of necessarily know or direction as to where exactly I wanted to be. I just figured if I get into a great school like U of T at the time, in a great program, it at least lined me up to something that I like. And then it was interesting because I kind of took the same approach with Ryerson as well, right? A great school, Ted Rogers School of Management, with a unique program that stands alone, different than all the other programs across the country, rather. And I still at year one didn't know that is exactly what I wanted to do, but I realized that I'm going to go in the direction now of business versus science. And then throughout the years, after year one, going into 2 and 3, I realized quickly that hospitality was my passion and it's where I wanted to direct my studies.
So when you transferred to Ryerson, did you like jump in straight away? Did you start getting involved? Were you more like, I want to focus on my studies? Like what was your time like at Ryerson?
Great question. So years 1 through 3, I didn't get nearly as involved as I wish I would have. Hindsight 2020, I would have loved to have gotten involved right off the bat in year 1. I think there was the aspect of me transitioning schools, me still having friends from my other school. I moved home as well for a year, so I was commuting in my first year at Ryerson, so it also made things a little bit more difficult when it came down to like offering time to get from work to home to school. And at the time, my home was in the GTA, so I was outside of the city. So I think I didn't have the appropriate amount of time allocated for it. But once I moved downtown in my second year, I really thought that was probably where I could have really started focusing a little bit more on getting involved, like with the RHAA and in school functions more or less at large. I think at that point you would have learned and connected with a lot more people. You'd have a lot more leverage, like relationships to leverage, and a lot of opportunities just to become a better version of yourself a lot quicker. I knew regardless at the end of the day that Ryerson and this program would make me a better version of myself, but I felt like I could have gotten there essentially faster by being more involved and surrounding myself with like-minded people with a broader skill set.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's how a lot of students feel, especially like first year is really intimidating and trying to get involved into things. And I got really lucky with how I started getting involved. But I think that's definitely something a lot of alumni feel is getting involved earlier is one of the biggest pieces of advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, like I totally relate to what you just said, Morgan, because like similar to you, like I only started getting involved at school like during my 4th year. Like from years 1 to 3, like I had this like I guess you can have like oh, I'm too cool for school kind of mentality. I was like, I don't need to do this. I'm just here to get my degree and go home.
Yeah.
But then now looking back, like you do kind of regret not getting involved and like making those connections earlier on.
I 100% agree with you too, and that's a part of the reason why I respect Chantel's approach there too, because in year 1, I think I met you when I was probably, coming back as an alumni for alumni association things, right? So at that point, I was impressed, being like, you're doing the right thing. Like, keep connecting, keep staying in touch, because these are the people that are going to help springboard you, not only in your knowledge of becoming a better person, but in your career, right? Connecting you with opportunities.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, Chantal definitely came in swinging.
I mean, to be fair, I moved across the country and I didn't really know anyone here, so there was only one way to go, and that was to hit the ground running.
In my 4th year, when I had to take the career strategies course, kind of inadvertently forced you to start thinking about your career, which I thought was really helpful. I did another little video for that course, so for future students, when they look at it, they'll kind of see what I gathered from the course and what I learned. And I said what it did was provide me with a springboard to action, right? I would say it didn't necessarily start me on extracurricular aspects of RHAA, but what it did do was it forced me to go out there and network with industry professionals. And then in an industry professional facet, being able to connect yourself back to a school and look into your school's resources on how they can connect with industry, kind of inadvertently introduced me to RHAA and things like that, because in order to get an interview with somebody at Starwood at the time, you'd go through the route of how do I go through those steps? Who do I reach out to? And the person that would connect you there would be RHAA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of one of those situations. I didn't actually go searching for RHAA. It just kind of fell in the process of me trying to get to the end goal, and I realized that it's partly about the journey versus the end goal, right? You need to invest in that process, and it inadvertently set me up to invest in myself and in that process.
You mentioned Starwood. So was that where, I guess, you got is it your first kind of like job, like in hospitality?
Yeah, so prior to Starwood, I was working in restaurants. I worked for the Moxie chain. So I'd worked there since I was about 17. I worked as a server, as a bartender, a server trainer. And again, that was part of the reason how I thought, you know what, maybe I could run my own place one day, or maybe I'd love to be a GM of a location like this, or potentially work somewhere in district management, or in the process of franchise sales, or things along those kind of lines. Yep. So I got my real chops in the food service industry first. And then as I was transitioning through the programs in Ryerson and taking different courses, I thought, I kind of already know what the food side of hospitality has in store. Let's kind of dip our toe here in hotels and see where we could go from there. So what I ended up doing was, again, through that class of career strategies, I took on an internship throughout that program. So I did I think it was a 6-month summer through September, like summer through fall internship. So it was off cycle from school. But what was great about it was it allowed me to kind of have 3 dedicated months at the beginning of just like not having to worry about balancing program and school and marks and projects and things like that. I could literally just focus on earning money at my part-time job and coming into the internship at the time, which was like a stipend internship. But it was great because you got to really meet and mix and mingle with the right people. It taught me, I got my foot in the door there, funny enough. Like, this might be kind of a side story, but I initially applied for HR as an intern in HR. Yeah. And I ended up actually, I thought I'd done well in the interview, and I felt pretty confident about my potential chances of getting a second interview. And I actually never ended up getting one. So what I ended up doing was, at the time, I thought, you know what, like, I want to get an internship. I like this team and I like this property. How about I just give them a call and see? So I called and asked about the internship, and then they said, yeah, unfortunately we went another direction, which is completely fair and respectable. They said they went in the direction of someone else because I could only dedicate, I think, 2 days a week to the internship, and the other person could dedicate 4.
Oh, so it came down to availability.
Yeah, it was an availability thing, right? But what was great is the fact that I took the initiative to call. When I did call, they said, honestly, when you were there, we knew you wanted to transition out of food and beverage and try something different, and you tried HR, but we still have a spot in food and beverage, and like, we know you can excel at it. Do you still want to try it? And then I was like, an internship somewhere is better than an internship nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And I said, sure, let's do it. So then I took that internship, and what was kind of nice about that was, since I kind of knew the food and beverage industry outside of that, it was an easier hitting the ground running type approach, right? Like, I knew I could stand behind the bar if I needed to. I knew how to manage potential personalities. So it was technically a supervisory role in an internship, right? And then it went over really well. And after the first 6 months, I had found out that there was going to be the Starwood Management Trainee program. So I thought to myself, right now, I'm learning a bunch, I'm leveraging relationships, and I will be around the individuals that could give recommendations for this kind of program. So not only am I going to continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to have fun while I'm doing it, but now I'm surrounding myself with the right kind of people. So then what I did from there was I made sure that I found out who I needed to connect with, who was the program manager. And it just so happened to be that my direct manager at the time was actually work colleagues and personal friends with the person who was in charge of the entire program.
Okay.
That is incredible.
Incredible, yeah.
Right? So it's part of it is being in the right place at the right time, but the other half of it is calling and showing up, right? Like, if I didn't call initially after being turned down to ask for something else, to show that I'm willing and able to learn, I would never have been given the opportunity. So I'd excelled in the restaurant side of it. So then what I did was I realized, okay, to get into this program, right now I have half the industry knowledge that I need. So the way the program worked was they accepted food and beverage management interns and rooms division management interns. So rooms division would be your housekeeping and your front desk and your engineering, and then food and beverage would be your banquets and your outlets, like restaurant side of the hotel business, right? And what they ended up doing was they ended up posting positions based on the hotel specific need at the time. So if the hotel was short in staff or short in management staff in food and beverage, they would post a position for a management trainee at that hotel, right? And you would, if accepted, you would work as a management trainee in both divisions of food and beverage, or on the room side in all three divisions of engineering, housekeeping, and rooms. And after a year of cycling through the departments, you would then be, based on the successful completion and belief in your ability, they would offer you a full-time job, right? But at the time, it was great because it's coming out of school. 7 people got this position across Canada, right? And it would look great on a resume regardless. So when I was there, I was already learning the food and beverage side. But what I ended up deciding to do was I knew that in order to fully get into this program, if I'd learned, let's say, the banquet side and the stewarding side, like the back kitchen side, it would just make me a shoe-in for the program. So I asked, can I just continue this internship, even though it doesn't exist anymore? Like, it's not really a thing, but let's just kind of make it one so that I can continue to learn and that I can make this choice easy for you. That's kind of what I said. And they said, sure, let's do it. So then I trained on for the next 4 or 5 months. And then throughout that whole process, I got to know the teams. I got to know the individuals who made those selections. I got to know individuals in HR. And when the time came up, they already knew who I was. So it was just about going through the behavioral interview and speaking about exact real life situations that I had gained from already working there as an intern. And then I guess I got my foot in the door. For me, I want people to realize at the end of it that there's a combination of luck, but it's all based on your initiative. Like, you make your own luck by surrounding yourself with the right individuals, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Remind me to call after interviews more.
Even if you don't get it at the end, because I called and it wasn't about finding out whether or not it's the job. It was so how can I improve the next time to get this type of a role? And they blatantly told me, they said, honestly, we don't think you would love this enough, and you didn't have the time, but we think you would excel in this. So multiple people have been telling me, go into food and beverage, go into food and beverage. And I was like, I'll try something else. But then I ended up doing it. So
But then sometimes they're right.
yeah.
Yeah. So you did the management trainee, but you got the management training position, and then you also moved up to a sales coordinator position. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I got the management trainee position, I actually, so my internship was at the Westin Harbor Castle in downtown Toronto. I had a great team. And when going throughout the internship, unfortunately, as much as I wanted to stay at the Westin actually didn't have a need at the time for another food and beverage management intern. The person the year prior, was the food and beverage intern. So they'd already hired someone in that realm.
Mhm.
So what they were looking for was someone with rooms experience, but I didn't have the rooms side experience. So it made more sense for me to apply to one of the hotels that was looking for food and beverage experience. So then what I ended up doing was the only option at that time in Ontario that was looking for a food and beverage intern was actually the Sheraton Gateway in Terminal 3 of Pearson. So I took the role there. And what was very great about that as well was after taking on that position, that's a smaller property. So unlike, so at the time, the Harbor Castle is like 900 rooms. The Sheraton Center is almost like 1,000 almost rooms. And those are two big beast of hotel properties, right? And they were both looking for rooms interns, which I wasn't that. I was a food and beverage intern. But the Gateway was only 200 rooms. But as a hotel, because it's an airport property, it has what you would consider a hotbed or a hot room. And what that would mean is people would fly in, check in, sleep for like 6 hours, get out, and then housekeeping staff would go in there, clean the room in 2 hours, and then put somebody else in that room. So even though they had 200 rooms, they were flipping rooms twice a day sometimes. So they were almost making twice the amount of money on that process, right? Which it's common, customary for hotels to do that, right? To go in there and flip and generate revenue. But what I'm getting at is it was a small beast, right? And people had the opportunity to wear a lot of hats. There was times where management was being stretched to different spots, so you got to learn and take on other opportunities. If I was in a bigger hotel, I would have put more for this internship process. I think I would have been more directioned and siloed into the food and beverage side. Whereas this hotel, they were like a well-rounded manager in any department, trained to do everything is what we want, because this job will require you to wear lots of hats. So I was lucky enough at the time to have a great mentor. His name's Brian Monroe. He's still one of my mentors today. And he was in human resources at the time. And he said, so what do you want to learn? And I go, well, I learned a lot about the food and beverage side, and I want to learn about everything. And he was like, okay, so technically you're a food and beverage management trainee. So we need to keep you in food and beverage the majority of your time. But there's going to be aspects that you need to know outside of that, because again, we will require you to wear a lot of hats. So he said, here, let's put together an itinerary and a program for you. So unlike some of the bigger hotels where they just had so many people that they wanted to direct you into certain avenues, this hotel ran leaner. So they said, you know what, let's teach you everything. So we put together a standardized program where I did a couple of weeks in the room side at the front desk, as well as a little bit in housekeeping, which wouldn't have been an option at another property, and a little bit in sales. And to get into the sales aspect, when I was getting into that rotation, I went into sales on the first day, and I started to meet the individuals. And at the time, sales actually wasn't based out of the property. It was based out of the Toronto Metro Market, which was a sales center in the downtown core.
Okay.
So essentially what would happen was instead of each salesperson being at the hotel, it would just be meetings, events, and event execution teams. And the sellers would be based out of the Sheraton Center in downtown Toronto in an office space. And it would operate as almost like a separate office representing 4 hotels. So when I went in there, I got immersed with really great professionals that were the top of their game in their industry, selling multiple hotels. So that seeing these people, connecting with clients, being on the phone, negotiating, working to create crazy sites set up and VIP opportunities being put in place, it excited me, right? And what I thought too with the sales side is as soon as I saw it, I realized how metric driven it was and how quantifiable it was. Every day in sales, you're chasing to move your needle, right? You're chasing to grow your client base. You're chasing to build an account. You're chasing to move revenue and bring revenue into your property, right? Whereas in the actual operation side, I loved and respected it, and I'd done it for, at that point in time, since I was 17 or 18 years old. And what it did miss for me was the proactive nature of it. The sales was more or less about threading, like moving the needle, building relationships, and planning on how you can execute your tasks moving forward. Whereas in the actual operations side, I felt like there was times where my job that day would be to make sure nothing went wrong. I liked and respected the reactive aspect of it, but I, as a person, am a planner. I'm a logistics person. I sit back and think, if I'm going to get from point A to point D, how do I get to B and C before I get there, right? Like, how am I going to map this out? Versus in the opposite, it was kind of, how do I put out this fire? How do I put out that fire? How do I set up a system to put out these fires all the time? But I wanted to just be more preemptive. I wanted to work towards a specific goal. I wanted to work towards something that I could quantify and see at the end of the year. And I felt like the sales aspect was where that was going. Plus personality, interest aspects of being able to chat with people and build relationships, learn more about their business models. All those things contributed towards my interest.
Yeah. So you really found your sales passion after you had kind of tried out a different few rotations and things like that. And then you just climbed the sales ladder.
Exactly. Started off as a coordinator in the Toronto metro market. And prior to going into it, technically the coordinating role, from going from a management level at property, going into a coordinating role would technically be at least in a hierarchy, a step downward, right? But I knew that it was a step that you needed to take in order to get your foot in the door and in order to be humble and to learn, right? And that's what I needed to do. I didn't have the hotel sales knowledge. I worked kind of in sales, but not ever in a professional sales capacity. So I was more than happy and willing to take that step downward or backward, I guess, rather, or maybe diagonal-ish to go and work in that type of environment where I could learn a bunch from a lot of amazing, smart people. And then again, springboard my career to the next level by being surrounded by people and opportunities that I could learn from.
I definitely agree with you. I'm a strong believer that you shouldn't feel like you're the smartest person in the room, because then you don't feel like you're learning or growing in any way.
Exactly. 100% agree with that for sure. And when I started in coordinating, I started coordinating between two different types of managers. One worked with massive, like citywide, multi-million-dollar program conventions, and her contracts would be like 15 to 16 pages, right? And then the other worked in small corporate bookings. So her contracts would be like 5 pages, and she would close deals all the time. Whereas the other individual would work a longer game to secure a huge client. So that person the other individual would put on a bunch of transactions, but the other individual's revenue goal was actually higher because of the limited number that she needed, but the massive size of these events, right? So it just took a little different skills, different sales approach to work those relationships. And I couldn't have been placed in a better environment because I had one person with the fast turn and burn, another person with the long game, continue to get to know that individual, right? And the contracts were just so different. So when I came into this specific role, it was a very heavy admin. I wasn't having those conversations. I was drafting contracts, drafting proposals, right? Blocking things in our system to make sure that we're accounting for certain programs already booked into the hotel. So my job was completely admin, and the most aspect I had of talking to a client was to let them know that their contract's ready, or here's their proposal, or should I make this change? It was very just admin, right?
Mhm.
But because it was two different sides of, or two different styles of groups in business, one of them I had to focus on the details for a massive, massive program, and you couldn't miss something, or else that could result in a lot of revenue loss. Versus the other one where you needed to have haste, you needed to go through it quick, you couldn't take the time. So it was switching back and forth. That was really hard at the beginning, but I felt like was my saving grace later on throughout my career because it allowed me to look at different types of business in different ways.
So, actually, we should have started with this. Morgan is currently in Vancouver, not
Right. Yes, this
Toronto.
would have
Yeah,
been
we should have
important.
mentioned that. So, you're plugging away in Toronto, living your best sales and coordinating self. So how did the opportunity in Vancouver come about?
So I actually made the opportunity in the
Oh, you
sense that
made it. Okay.
I made it. Like again, as I told you, it's all about building those relationships and and asking individuals for coffee, having strong questions to
Yeah.
pose them. As I was progressing my career in Toronto, it was moving quite quickly, which was great, and I was learning a bunch from a lot of really smart individuals. I finally got to the point where I wanted to transition into a full large corporate group seller, and
Mhm.
typically that role is held by someone who's relatively senior in a position. And at the hotel that I was at, that individual was very talented and very gifted and had no plans to leave. At that point in time, I started broadening my um, potential options of where I could work. And I thought to myself, okay, I'd already worked at the time representing the Sheraton Center as well as the Westin Harbor Castle in group sales capacity. Those are the two biggest hotels in the East Coast. Now, how about I look in the West Coast, and I want to try to go to one of the biggest places there as well. So I had reached out to the directors at the time at the Sheraton and the Westin Wall Center, and that's currently where I'm at right now. There was no job that was ever available upon the first two times that I connected, but I made an active decision to keep visiting Vancouver because I knew of the places that I'd want to move and the cities that I'd want to have under my belt as a career starting springboard again. I keep using the word springboard because it just works, I guess. But I moved to Vancouver because again it was the next biggest city, and this hotel was the next biggest hotel. So I thought, translatable. But when I got to get to know the sales team there, my directors at the time, Sean and Eric, and I realized as a team and as a philosophy and as an approach to sales and business, I really aligned with them, and I aligned with that process. They cared about the same things that I did about building relationships with clients, not necessarily worrying about details, but doing everything right by the client to continue to have that foundational relationship that'll bring business for the future, right? And make things
Yeah.
easier. So they had that same approach of handling business like I do. So we just gravitated towards each other. And then it was interesting because right at, I would say, the end of 2018, a position opened up. And as soon as I saw it, I reached out and said, "Hey, I noticed that a position was coming available." And they said, "Yeah, the position's in catering sales, but I know that's not necessarily what you want." I said, "That's true, it isn't." And they said, "But here's what's going to happen. Someone's going to move into that position, and there's going to become a group position in the next 3 months that's not posted. Let's chat about that." And then I
Okay.
talked to them about the position that wasn't available. And the moment it became available, I kind of was set up for success to just transition into that role.
And it's really funny to hear you talk about how you're looking for like the next step and you decided to go to Vancouver because I did the literal opposite and I came from Vancouver to Toronto for my next step.
It's funny how that works, right? But again, it's all rooted in the same process of
Mhm.
growing as a person and growing in education with schooling or in your career. If you're open to taking on different opportunities, you're never going to walk away with something negative. You're always going to walk away with a positive learning, whether it be that was the right fit or that wasn't the right fit. It'll save time in the future and just align you to where you need to be.
So you end up going to Vancouver. I remember congratulating you that you were going to Vancouver.
Yeah, thanks.
And then And then I think this is right around when COVID hit, and I know we use this word a lot, but I think you had to end up doing some pivoting from what you might normally do in sales, right?
Perfect. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. So
Mhm.
what happened with with me was I officially moved to Vancouver 2 weeks before the world shut down. I moved to Vancouver on March
Oh
1st,
wow.
Oh
2019,
my gosh.
right? I was working remotely for the hotel in Toronto a month prior, just building relationships because I was already living in Toronto, so it made sense to have the guy who's living in Toronto meet with Toronto clients. So a lot of my counterparts didn't have to make those business trips because I was kind of a rep that was based there. But then when I moved here in March, it was a hot 2 weeks before the world changed, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what happened there was a lot of the team ended up having to take some furlough, I guess, rather. And when there was positions to be brought back, they ended up bringing me back in earlier than some of the individuals that have actually been there for years. And the reason I think they did it, and they told me after the fact, was when you came from Toronto, you worked in operations. You worked as a coordinator. You worked as a small group seller, a small catering seller, a large catering seller, right? You had a background in all those different realms. So we don't know what this world's going to look like. We don't know what our business is going to look like for in the next month. Things are just changing every single day. So we want to bring you back because if you need to be a coordinator for a day, you can. If you need to be a large group seller for a day, you can. We know we didn't bring you here to be a small catering seller or a coordinator, but we know that you have the skill to do it and best assist our team for some people who may not, right? So let's say some certain individuals that were senior people that hadn't done that job for, let's say, years, whereas for me I did it 3 or 4 years ago, so it's still fresher in my
Yeah.
mind versus somebody who did it 15 to 20, right?
Mhm.
So they ended up taking me on, which was great. I did mainly a hybrid role of just doing whatever I needed to do. And then what they did do is they gave me a focus on business development. And I thought that was really crucial at the time as well. And it proved to be a very successful process because what I did during those next 6 months was I had a list of our clients from the past as well as individuals that we were trying to get to know and accounts that we were trying to build. And I was literally just reaching out to contacts, trying to call and email everybody, right? So I'd be making 60 to 70 calls a day, just trying to say that, hey, we're here and we're going to be a partner in the process to make things happen at the Wall Center. Then what happened from there was we had to go through another situation where we had to let people go again. It was one of those individuals that unfortunately had to get let go at that point. And I thought, you know what? If there's a time to transition and try something different, now's it, right? So I applied to a bunch of different types of roles, and I ended up having to pick between a tech sales job and a commodity trading job. So I thought at the time that I gelled better with the commodities trading role, so I ended up selecting that as the option to go for at least next for the time being. So in January of this year, I started off as a commodities trader. So, and what I was doing is I was selling physical agriculture. So imagine kind of like a little bit of a Wolf on Wall Street type deal, but substitute grain for physical, like financial instruments, right? Like, so
Okay.
essentially what I was doing was I was calling farmers, trying to buy wheat off of them, and then trying to sell it to another one of my own buyers for a margin, right? So we were dealers of agriculture at the time. So it would be wheat, oats, peas, lentils, all different types of products. I learned a whole bunch about it. I learned a whole bunch about the sales process. It taught me so much about negotiations because things were different. Like it wasn't a nice written email anymore. It was a phone call, and it was 90 of them almost a day, right? Of just trying to get people on the phone and sell me their physical grain or their physical products. I learned a whole bunch. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about agriculture. differences in
Yeah.
G's and W's. And it was really interesting. But the thing I
A
missed
whole
about
other side of food and beverage.
the
Yeah.
rudimentary side of it, right?
Yeah.
And what I missed though in the whole timing was building relationships and understanding different companies' business models and how they work. I felt like in the hotel of sales, it was an account style role where I got to really get to know an account rep for or a travel manager or a third party manager of large conferences. I got to know those people, their connections, build relationships with them, as well as understand how we can help them reach their business goals for their conferences and for their business travel, right? Whereas on the other side, it was more or less transactional and it was quick and book it and move on. So I missed that aspect of hotels. But when I was leaving, I talked to my leadership team member at the time, Eric, and he told me, obviously, we'd love to have you back when we can, but you can't wait, obviously, and we know that you have to look for another opportunity. And when all of that happened, it kind of all worked itself out where the opportunity that presented itself was in business travel, which is the only market that I hadn't yet worked in hotel sales. So I was excited at that opportunity because it would help be the full rounded out circle of learning.
So now you finally landed your current role as a business travel sales manager. So
Yeah,
tell us a
so
little bit about like a typical day, like in your job right now.
sure. So right now I represent two hotels in Vancouver. One is the Sheraton Wall Center, and the other is the Westin Wall Center in Vancouver Airport. Right now, it's kind of hard to explain because COVID has impacted what you do in a typical day. Prior to COVID, my job would be a little bit different, but pretty similar to what it is now. Right now in hotels, it's typically RFP season, so request for proposal time. And what a business travel sales manager does is they establish specific rates for specific seasons for corporations. So company X wants to come in and stay in, or company X has this amount of business travel a year, and they want to set up agreed upon corporate rates so that they don't have to pay the typical rate that they'll see online. But instead, you have a corporate agreed upon rate over a certain time frame. What I essentially do is I work directly with companies to set up rates that they can utilize for their business travelers. And in order to get to those rates, you need to kind of look into past year's data and production to understand what makes sense to offer, right? If an account has 50 nights a year, they're going to get a very different rate offer from me than an account that has 5,000 room nights a year, right? Volume impacts your discount, right? And when you're putting together those types of negotiations, you really got to look into previous year's usage and spend in hotels. Right now, my job's a little difficult because last year nobody traveled, right? So I kind of have to look at 2019 numbers and take it with a grain of salt to understand where the industry is potentially going, right? So that's kind of what I do from a rudimentary sense. But in order to get all that information, it's your own data that you obtain through hotels and through people staying. But a lot of it is through interaction, getting to know clients personally, getting to know their business travel and their trends and what they could potentially need, getting to know your industry partners, getting to know your colleagues in the industry for insights and tips, getting to know third parties like travel management companies, because those companies are repping a lot of these travelers or a lot of these other companies, right? There'll be a travel management company that works for a major corporation because the corporation doesn't have the bandwidth or someone dedicated to do that job. So instead, they pay for a third party company to come in, negotiate those rates, and manage travel for them throughout the entire year. So you have to get to know those companies too, because they know people and clients and end users. So what I would say I really do is I consistently work towards gathering tangible information through building relationships.
Wow. That was a really nice summary, I think. That one-liner of your
Yep.
job description.
Thanks. I have a weird habit of being able to go on about it, and then there's like one thing at the end, and it works. But it took a long time to explain something that I could have just said that way.
Yeah.
But
No, I think that was perfect.
More info, the better, I guess. So.
All right. So, so from working for Starwood and as well as the Sheraton Wall Center, you do stay at a company for like long periods of time. Like you do grow within a company. So I guess my question here is like, what do you think is like the key to longevity in a company or the key to growth in a company?
I think the key to growth in a company is to understand what you want, as well as be open and transparent to your HR and to your own leadership team. People want to help other people. I think inherently, I firmly believe that. I think if you find out right off the bat that you have a leader who doesn't want to help you get to your dreams, then you're probably not in the right spot. So having that conversation is important, right? Same with human resources, because they work together with those kind of cross-training programs and things along those lines. I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by people that want to help me learn and want to help me grow. When I was transitioning out of hotels, the individual that was interviewing me for the commodities job asked me, he said, "It looks like you've always done hotels. Like, why have you stuck around? Like, why didn't you try something different?" Because I think he was worried that I was gonna go and leave, right? And then I was like, well, in all honesty, I was always open to opportunities, but every leader I had was great and kept giving me opportunities to learn. I stuck around and I stayed on teams because I was in an environment where it was healthy to ask questions and healthy to want to become better. And because those types of people fostered those environments, right? So I would say again, longevity in a company is really what you want to make of it, right? And a good leader will want to keep you in any way that they can. And there will be a point where they can't keep you anymore because your desire they might not be able to meet it logistically, right? If a position's not available, then you can't necessarily take it. But that leader can teach you everything that you need to know outside of doing the job itself to set you up for the next job. And then that leader will then, if they're a great person, which again I've been fortunate to be around, they'll introduce you to those people and say, this person knows this, how to do this already. I put my stamp of approval on this person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that was a great last piece of advice to give to anyone, not just current hospitality students, though I did take note of that.
Yeah. All right. So we could talk to you like for like another hour or so, but we do have to wind down the conversation. So Chantel has a quick little game that we play with all our guests. It's just a
surprise.
Take it away, Chantel.
It's just a rapid fire this or that. It's gonna be two things, and you just choose one of the two.
And I
ready?
Just go at it.
Yeah. Okay. Hotel or Airbnb?
I just have to go, right?
Yes. You just go. You just go.
Don't think about it. Just go.
Yes.
Okay.
Hotel or Airbnb?
Hotel.
Dine in or take out? Quick.
Both. Dine in. Because of COVID, I miss doing it.
That is fair. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Music or podcast?
Podcast. Shameless
Morning
plug.
bird.
Yep.
That was a really good plug. Morning bird or night owl?
Morning bird.
Mm-hmm. City lights or countryside?
City lights.
Night in or night out?
Night out.
And the last question, Toronto or Vancouver? I don't think I could answer this one either, to be honest.
Toronto.
Answer two.
All right. So we've hit that rewind button throughout this conversation. So let's hit the fast forward button. Where do you see yourself in around 5 years' time?
5 years time, I would love to be a director of sales and marketing, or
In
a
Vancouver.
yeah,
Ideally.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
In my own made up village of
Yep.
Vancouver. No, but in all seriousness, I'd love to be a director of sales and marketing, whether it be of a larger island potential resort property somewhere there, or I would love to do even a smaller property in a densely populated city, a smaller hotel that was driven on business travel and was kind of cool and edgy and different. Nothing too standard. Something a little different, a little out there with some of the new. Marriott has a lot of new creative, smaller luxury brands and lifestyle brands that I would love to be a part of, and I think that could be something in my future. At least that's what I'd hope.
After hearing your journey, like, we believe you have what it takes to get there.
Absolutely. I think
Absolutely.
you have a incredibly diverse skill set, and I look forward to seeing you on the island one day.
I know, right?
Yeah. All right.
I'll
And
I'll have you both. We'll both be there. Again,
Oh,
it's
yes,
Awesome.
exactly.
Vancouver. All right.
Well,
And finally, what is the last piece of advice, or the advice that you would give to anybody studying hospitality right now?
I would tell them that the opportunities that are going to be in this industry are going to be plenty. There's a lot of individuals that have left because either they wanted to try something different, or they were retired, or it just didn't work out in the realm of what they were working towards. But I would strongly suggest individuals to go that have the passion or the interest to still follow it, because right now, young talent is something that everyone is looking for. They're looking for people that are dedicated and open to learning a lot of different things. So I guess it ties in with be ready and open to learn whatever it is that they're willing to teach you, because it's going to be a skill set that you can take with you whether you still pursue hospitality or not. And at the same time too, you have the opportunity now to learn and do a lot of different types of roles that prior to a pandemic you wouldn't have had, because there was barriers, because there was lanes that you needed to stay in your process of learning and growing. Now those have been completely shattered. You can make your own roadmap in this industry, and going into it, you can. There's a lot of people looking to support and cultivate your growth. Me being one of them. I want to be able to continue to give back and to continue to help inspire people to want to pursue growth in this industry, because it's a people industry, it's a passion-filled industry, and it's a positive industry.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you, Morgan, for being on our podcast.
Thank you for having
Yeah.
me. I feel like I
Yeah.
may have rambled here and there, but
No, it's totally fine.
All relevant to the journey.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly, right?
Yep. So Morgan's LinkedIn is on the screen right now, and will also be in the podcast description if you want to reach out to him as well. And just a reminder that you can also follow RHAA at RHAA Ryerson on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And our LinkedIn is just our full name. Once again, thank you. We wish you nothing but success. And hopefully one day we can all hang out at Vancouver.
I hear the weather, but
yeah, we're never going to let that go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how both of your successes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.